Today, we are talking all about blueprints and construction of the nervous system. And although you don't need a construction hat, what I do recommend is that as you're listening, that you have an open mind and you come with curiosity and non-judgment as we learn about why you might do things that drive you crazy. You might have patterns that you have seen in your parents or your grandparents and how to bring some awareness and learning and curiosity, and even how to do some remodeling with those blueprints. Welcome to Burnout Solutions, a podcast designed to help high achievers and healthcare professionals understand stress and how it can lead to burnout. Together, we'll explore how your brain and nervous system naturally work and why they sometimes hold you back, and how to overcome those challenges to fully enjoy the success you've worked so hard to create. I am your host, Mona Tippett, registered nurse, burnout coach, and resiliency educator. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time, I have a special welcome for you. If this is your 10th time, thank you so much for listening to these podcasts. Making a podcast is a little bit more work than I thought, but I was inspired to do a podcast. It was not my idea, it was God's. And so I am trying to do my best to produce these podcasts. And today we are talking about our blueprint. And I just want to warn you that it's going to be pretty personal. And I'm going to share some stories and experiences that are just a little bit vulnerable about when I was growing up. And I don't want you to think that I'm throwing my parents under the bus or blaming them in any way about how I was raised. I have gained huge awareness of why I am like I am. And this has been very helpful for me to make the changes and to help me identify patterns that I have that really aren't helpful. And I really do think this is a reason why God wanted me to share this podcast, is to help other people learn and hopefully relate to things that I have experienced. And hopefully they can get their own validation and know how to help themselves. So, I'll just keep going. If you were one of my clients, or if you spend a lot of time around me, besides using the word regulated a lot, I also say things like, oh, I think that's just part of your blueprint. Or when I do something that I've been doing for years and it drives me crazy, I often mutter under my breath, oh, that dang blueprint. So we're going to talk about your nervous system blueprint. And what is a blueprint? Well, I like to think of a blueprint just like we use blueprint in construction or in engineering. The blueprint is just the original design for something. Like, let's talk about a house. The blueprint for a house is the piece of paper that guides everything else. It tells the construction workers where to put the plumbing, where the electrical lines will go, where the walls go, where are the windows, where are the doors, where does the foundation sit on the lot, where is the HVAC. So this blueprint tells and makes sense of the building that is being built. So our nervous system has its own blueprint. And there has been some scientific evidence that they believe that your blueprint even starts in utero. Thought that was really interesting. Anxiety and stress can be recorded in the developing fetus. And because your blueprint is the base of your nervous system, even now as an adult, it still shapes how you can react to stress, how you connect with other people. It helps you with your relationships, and it helps you make sense of the world. Now, again, I am not trying to blame or shame. This is just about awareness, because once you understand the foundation that you were built with, you can start to build something new. You can start to do reconstruction. You can do a remodel. Also is something that can support the life that you actually want to live, the life that you want to live with intention. And for me, once I understood my blueprint, just the awareness has the power to completely change how you see yourself and the people around you. And just like all of the knowledge I've gained about the nervous system, it has helped me so much understand myself and the mess that I am, and that all humans are messy. So, today I'm going to be talking a lot about things that I've read and been taught from Dr. Bruce Perry, Dr. Dan Siegel, Deb Dana, and Steven Porges, and a lot about polyvagal theory. And these mentors are who I am using to help explain how the blueprint forms and how we can begin to shift it. I wanted to start with talking about what does our blueprint do? Well, your nervous system blueprint is really the default setting that your body and brain use to interpret and respond to the world around you. It influences a few things: whether you feel safe or threatened in everyday situations. It influences how easily you connect with other people. It also, this is huge, influences what triggers your stress or your shutdown. It also influences how you recover after a difficult event. Your blueprint tells you how you relate to the world, where you fit in with the world. It tells you so many things about relationships, how to communicate, how to love other people, how to accept love from other people, how to perceive what other people are doing and their intentions. A lot of us have a religious blueprint. A lot of us have a blueprint that taught us our thoughts and beliefs about God, about other races, about other religions. We often have eating blueprints, right? Eating patterns that happen in our family. My husband grew up in a home that put jam on their grilled ham and cheese sandwiches. That was very normal for them. That is not normal for me. It was not in my blueprint, so I think that's strange. We also have holiday blueprints. You were taught how people and things should be celebrated. We have just so many ideas about how we see the world and what we think are right or wrong based on this blueprint. Deb Dana calls your blueprint your autonomic story. So the story that your body tells your brain what is happening. Because remember, our nervous system walks into a room before we do. Dan Siegel likes to talk about how your blueprint is the foundation of your window of tolerance. And I talked all about window of tolerance a few episodes ago. You can go and listen to that. But basically, your window of tolerance is your ability to handle stress without freaking out, or the zone where you can feel calm, alert, capable, connected, and handle stress and still behave well. Some of us have a very wide window of tolerance, and some of us have a very narrow window of tolerance because of the people around us and the windows that they had. When we saw our parents freak out, we saw that that was normal. And again, this is not a flaw. This is just your body and brain, your nervous system, doing what it learned to do to survive. This blueprint was laid down relationally. And because it formed so early in our fetal development as toddlers, before we were 8 years old, we often don't even know it's there. And we just think it's who we are. I had a client who always said, well, I just don't like talking to people. That's how I am. That's how I've always been. And I can't change it. Okay, well, you can, but it will take some work. Part of the blueprint that I was raised in is that we can yell and freak out and be super stressed around our family and inside the walls of our home, but never in public. In public, we have a smile. We say that everything's fine. We're doing wonderful. And I think a lot of Americans have that same blueprint, that we fake it. Okay, let's move on to the next part. How does the blueprint form? This is what I loved from Dr. Bruce Perry. This is from his book called What Happened to You. And in that book, he teaches about how the brain develops from the bottom up. I've talked about this before in other podcasts, but I wanted to review it here. The first part to develop is the brainstem. And again, this is a survival part of your brain. The next is the limbic system, where we have emotions and connection and relations. And then finally is the cortex. This is logic and language. And that part doesn't even finish developing until your mid to late 20s. So much of our younger years is a lot of recording really close with our subconscious and parts of the brain that are in survival and emotional parts of the brain. So this means that our earliest experiences before we even have words have a huge impact on how we see life, especially with our experience of feeling connected and feeling safe. For example, if a baby cries and they are met with comfort, their nervous system learns the world is safe and I am not alone. I can rest. I have someone that I can count on to soothe me. However, if the baby is not met soon, or if they are neglected or met with unpredictability or, is ignored or shamed, their nervous system learns I must stay on high alert and I can't trust connection, or I can't trust that people around me will take care of me. And again, this is not about having bad parents. This is about stress and trauma. This is about misattunement and how all of these things of being raised by imperfect humans shapes our developing system. I know that the best well-meaning parents can be under chronic stress and can unintentionally wire in survival patterns. I have unfortunately done similar to my children, which I'm trying to repair. But this is why this information has been so great for me, is that it has helped me have compassion and understanding in all of these situations. Dr. Dan Siegel emphasizes how early attachment experiences literally shape the architecture, I thought this was fascinating, of the right brain. So the right brain is more our emotion and our relational memory, and it really does change the architecture of the brain. Steven Porges, with the polyvagal theory, which I love, helps us understand that the nervous system is always scanning for cues of safety and danger. And this starts in the womb. This is called neuroception. This is when we use all 5 of our senses. What are we seeing? What are we hearing? What are we feeling? What do we smell? And we're gathering all of that information 12 times per second. And the brain uses that information to shape our earliest relationships, what we feel inside, what we feel outside, and then relationally in between. And again, I want to remind you that children are very good at observing, but they are not very good at interpreting because their prefrontal cortex is not developed and the logical part of their brain is not working. I love Deb Dana because she talks about how when we come into the world, we are wired to connect. We are human beings and we want to connect, and we feel safe through connection. However, we also have a drive to protect ourselves. Our brain and our nervous system's main job is to keep us alive and keep us to survive. And so often we have that longing to connect, but that drive to protect. So if connection wasn't safe, your system may have learned to do it alone, to shut down, to rely on yourself and nobody else. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about how I grew up. And I was raised in the 80s. I was born to, my dad was a dairy farmer. I was the 4th daughter. My parents were also building a home when my mom was pregnant with me. And I'm sure that had added stress. And they moved in August. I was born in September. So my dad, being a dairy farmer, really wanted boys, obviously, to help him work the farm. My mom was also hoping for a boy, and they had me named. My name was supposed to be Mark. My mom made a baby blanket for me that was blue and yellow. And when I was born, well, guess what? I was a girl. And when my mom brought me home, one of my sisters said, "We don't want a girl, send her back. We wanted a brother. We were supposed to get a brother." And this story is something that my family tells still with humor. And as a child, I don't remember necessarily feeling unwanted, but from the research that I've done and learned all about the brain and nervous system, my behaviors as even a toddler make sense to me that I really feel like I was in a state of fight or flight and survival from a very, very young age. So let's say my nervous system and brain probably recorded, "You are not wanted. You are supposed to be a boy." I'm actually shocked that I don't have like gender confusion. But my very first memories were working really hard on the farm. I went to a brain conference about 2 years ago, and I watched a documentary where Gabor Mate said, when people don't feel loved, they want to feel needed, and that drives their behaviors. And this was totally true for me. I remember being a toddler and not being able to carry a calf bottle. A calf bottle is 2 quarts. It was too heavy for me. And I think subconsciously, I wanted to prove my value and my worth to my family, and I wanted to be needed in my family. And part of my blueprint is just that we worked hard to survive. My dad was a farmer. His dad was a farmer. These are blueprints that are generational and that are passed on. Another thing that happened in my early childhood, there were several things that happened that were hard, actually. My grandma moved in with us, my mom's mom, and my mom and her mom didn't really get along that well. And my grandma was a very critical person, and she passed that on to my mom, most likely. I grew up feeling that nothing that I did was right, nothing that I did was good enough. And it was a very hypercritical environment. I also remember growing up that I felt like there was nobody that I could rely on. I was the fourth of 8 children, and I think this can often happen in large families where there's just a lot of kids. And this is my adult brain looking back on my childhood. But I do remember feeling like it was hard for me to ask my parents to do something. And if I needed their help, if I wanted to be talked to, if I had an emotion, it was just be quiet, go away, sit down. I was dismissed a lot. And as a result, I became very independent at a very young age. I did have other hard things that happened. Like I had a sister that was born with microcephaly and she was handicapped. And this was really hard on my family. And it's a little bit strange because I know looking back that it was hard, but it was something that we never talked about. We never talked about that she was handicapped. She did live with us for, I think at 14 months, she went to a care center and we would go visit her on Sundays, but we never talked about how she was sick. We never talked about the stress on the family. And then she passed away right before I was 8 years old. And we also never talked about her death. And at that time, my mom went into a deep depression. And looking back, again, I didn't know as a child, oh, my mom's depressed. No, I just saw that my mom sat on the couch all the time and she watched TV. She was very sad. She cried a lot. And so as an 8-year-old, I started making dinner. I remember pulling a chair up to the kitchen sink and doing dishes. I remember being the parents to my little brothers. I learned to and tried to control the environment and the people of those around me to feel safer inside. Also, my grandpa died when I was young, and he was my dad's coworker on the farm. Together, they ran the farm, and that was a stress financially to have him pass away, and I'm sure emotionally. So I'm just saying, I felt like if I took care of myself, then I wouldn't be a burden on my parents. In high school, I had 3 jobs. I bought my own car. I paid for my own insurance. I remember going to the grocery store and buying my own food. I also remember a few Christmases, I bought my own Christmas presents. And with 8 kids, it's too hard to have a birthday party for every single kid every single year. And as I got older, I just told my mom, don't worry about doing a birthday party for me. It's fine. I'm fine. Don't even worry about a cake. And I could see some sort of relief on her face that she didn't have to worry about it. It was not something she had to make a cake or plan or do anything. And these are just behaviors and patterns that I developed based on my nervous system being in protection. I want to protect myself from being emotionally hurt. So let's not have a birthday party. Part of me said, I want to protect my mom from having to worry about hosting a birthday party, making the birthday cake, buying me a gift. If I just say it doesn't matter, that will be just a win-win for both of us. So let's fast forward now and talk about the next topic of how does this blueprint show up in adulthood? Well, let's just say that your blueprint was wired for protection, like mine was. You might feel anxious even when there's nothing wrong. You might get overwhelmed in conflict. You might be hyper independent and you don't want to delegate to others because you don't feel like you can trust them, or you've seen things fall through so many times and not work out. Another thing when you are wired for protection is that you overwork to gain value. You have anxiety about being perfect and shame when you're not. You can struggle to rest even when you're exhausted. You can be a people pleaser and avoid conflict because as a child, that just created problems. If you had emotions or if you had a problem that needed to be addressed, it just added more stress to the family. So you learned very young to dismiss your feelings, to dismiss your problems, to take care of it yourself, to just figure it out. And that's what I did. Some people also isolate themselves and they don't really understand why. I learned through modeling that when there's something hard and an uncomfortable conversation to have, you just don't say anything, right? We never talked about my sister dying. And that conveyed to my nervous system, just avoid hard conversations, just avoid difficult things to talk about. And even just having a mindset of living in scarcity and how you spend your money and being frugal. I grew up in a house where my mom and dad yelled, "Turn off the lights," because they were concerned about the electrical bill. I still tell my kids, "Turn off the lights." But guess what? Now with LED light bulbs, they cost, 17 cents a year per light bulb. Even at 100 light bulbs in my house, they could be on all day and it would cost me $17. This is a generational pattern that started with probably my grandparents during the Depression, where money was tight, where electricity was maybe not always available. And just those thinking patterns of we have to save every single cent and nickel passes on. And so even me telling my kids to turn off the lights, this is where my brain and nervous system are not helping. Because the reality is, who cares? Besides giving Mother Earth a break, I can afford the electrical bill. Thank goodness. We could leave our lights on and everything would be okay. And lights left on isn't something that we need to stress out about. So often we have a nervous system blueprint or pattern running inside of ourselves that was learned decades ago or generations ago. I've passed on more parts of the blueprint down to my children than I would have liked. And now that I know about this, I'm doing a lot to repair, to repent, to change. I'm trying to show, hey, I used to think that this was really important, but now I'm realizing this is just a way that my nervous system are trying to keep me safe, but it's not working. I'm also trying to model that it's okay to make mistakes. I'm trying to model that we are not critical and judgmental of other people. And I am especially working on becoming a more regulated person to model that regulation and to help my family feel that regulation from me. So the next part that I wanted to talk about was how can you change your blueprint? After you've identified parts of your blueprint that you see aren't helping, how can you change it? And is it possible? Absolutely, yes, it is possible, but not with willpower and thoughts alone. You cannot think your way into a new blueprint. And I've talked about this before in my podcast that I went to life coaching school and I learned all about the brain and all about the way that if you change your thoughts, you change your life. And that is true to a point, but your nervous system has to be in a regulated state to have those changes happen. You have to experience and feel your way into it. It often helps if regulation and the blueprint that you want to adopt is modeled to you because it's a feeling. And Deb Dana also talks about how connection happens in moments. It takes seconds over and over and over and over again, reinforcing to your nervous system that you are safe and connected. And again, when I need safe and connected, it's emotionally safe. It's mentally safe. It's not always physically safe, but it can just be, it is safe to be me right now. Another way that has helped me change my blueprint, and I talked about this last week, it's from Dr. Dan Siegel, and he says, name it to tame it. It helps bring your body and your brain in alignment into paying attention to what your body is connecting to your brain. It's naming the emotion so that you can relax into it. You can process the emotion. Bruce Perry talks about a sequence that is first you regulate, then you relate to the people around you, and then logic and reason is last. So we have to calm our nervous system before we can connect or before we can make new choices. Deb Dana, I love her. She has so many tools. She talks about building a new vocabulary with our nervous system. So doing practices like tracking your nervous system state throughout the day, learning what cues safety for you. She calls these glimmers. So what makes you feel safe? For me, again, growing up on a dairy farm, when I'm driving through Idaho, I often smell fresh cut alfalfa. That is a glimmer to me. That is a positive reinforcement of the good things I think about growing up as a child. And that I purposely take the time to go, oh, that smells like home. That's like a good memory in my mind. So when we can pay attention to things that make us feel safe and connected, that make us feel loved and wanted, our nervous system pays attention to those cues. Some of those cues can also be certain voices that bring relief to you, certain people, certain places. A lot of people go to the ocean because it's so healing. Hiking and camping and, being in nature is a huge cue of safety to a lot of people. Also, I do this often, is just taking daily micro moments of regulation. So I relax my body often. I remind my nervous system there's no danger in my world. And the more you do that, the more your nervous system can move from the distress side of the Yerkes-Dodson law to the eustress side of the Yerkes-Dodson law. And I have a podcast that I talked all about that. So you can listen to that if you need more explanation. Also, just having new experiences of safety, especially in relationships, is huge for your nervous system. And this is where we can begin to shift patterns. This is why there's therapy. This is why I help people with life coaching. I help people understand their blueprint. I help people understand how their nervous system is working really hard to protect them when there's no danger. And I help them identify those patterns that may be generational and those patterns that are not helping them. And I would love to help you if you are interested. It is also important to have a supportive community around you. All of these things are really powerful in helping your nervous system feel safe. Again, healing happens in connection. So the last part that I wanted to talk about was why this matters and what it has to do with burnout solutions and healthcare workers. So again, understanding my nervous system blueprint helped me see things differently. I stopped blaming myself for being too much or not enough. It helped me stop trying to logic my way out of my survival responses. And it helped me meet myself with love and compassion and grace. So I'm hoping that, especially with healthcare workers and those who are in the caring profession who take care of other people, that this can bring some awareness for yourself and also some awareness for the people that you care for. So I've talked about this with Dr. Gentry a few times, who is my personal mentor on a lot of these concepts. And he talks about, in his experience of being a therapist since the early 90s, that there are certain characteristics and patterns that can lead to burnout. And, I've mentioned them: overworking, hypervigilance, hyperindependent, not trusting people or avoiding people, avoiding hard conversations, having a perception that's different from reality. Your nervous system, puts on a lens that you see the world through, and it changes how you perceive things. And this is not a blanket statement, and this is not applicable to all caretakers. But a lot of people who take care of people do this because it is a pattern. And it is a pattern that started as a child and is a pattern that is rooted in our survival instincts and continued into adulthood. It was a way of caring for other people when we were young because that's where we got our worth. That's where your place was in the family. That's where you felt needed and acknowledged, and you use those characteristics and desires to feel good about yourself, and you turn that into a career. And this can lead us to burnout because you can never work hard enough to get enough recognition to fill your own cup. This is why we're working on learning about our blueprint, working on being more regulated, and understanding our background so that we can make a more intentional present and future. So, just in closing up, I wanted to take a moment to talk about if you have found that you have a blueprint that may be contributing to things that you do that you don't love, and how you can start to heal from those past painful experiences. And the first thing, like I've said so many times, is awareness. So for me, I can have more compassion with the generations before me because I know now that all of the things that I was taught in my blueprint that are not helpful is because I was around dysregulated adults. My parents went from being in fight or flight to shutdown and were on the right side of the Yerkes-Dotson law and living in distress. And that is what happens when we live in chronic stress. That is what happens when our nervous system is hijacking our brain. And that is just what happens from being a human. So I'm not faulting my parents for what they did. I'm not faulting my grandparents for what they did because my grandparents gave my parents their blueprint and the people before them. So these are generational patterns of humans in dysregulation, which is very easy to happen when we're not taking care of ourselves and monitoring our stress level, which I don't think they knew about that back then. I mean, I just learned this myself. So having compassion for the people that came before us, and then having compassion for yourself, and just see it for what it is. And the next step is you learn wisdom from it, which is where you say, okay, that could have been hurtful and painful in the past. And how has that helped me? I believe that when we are stuck in being mad and bitter and resentful and in victim mode, we do not learn the wisdom that life offers us. My personal opinion, and me being a woman of faith, I believe that this life is for us to have experiences, for us to learn and grow, to learn forgiveness and kindness. And I do believe that Jesus Christ will heal all wounds and make everything right. And when we can find even the tiniest bit of good from our past pain, that is where we grow and learn. And just forgiving other people and their humanness has helped me be able to feel more love and joy in my life, which is a good thing to have good emotions in our life. The last thing is just to recognize your actions for what they are. Say, oh, this is part of my blueprint. When I see myself trying to overwork, trying to overperform, trying to do things that have been part of my pattern since my childhood, I call myself out. Oh, okay. This is me getting stuck in a pattern from my nervous system. My value was set by God, who created me, and nothing that I can do or nothing that I don't do will change it. So I'm welcome to keep working. I certainly can choose that, but it has nothing to do with my value and nothing to do with who I am as a person. And also, now that I am an adult and my blueprint offers me things, I can use my prefrontal cortex and say, okay, I get to choose what parts of my blueprint I subscribe to. I get to choose what patterns I want to change and what patterns I want to keep. What ideas that were taught to me, I get to remodel, and which ones I get to pass on. And this has been huge for me to live a life of intention, which is a lot of what I teach. If you ask any of my clients, I say this all the time. Who do I want to be right now? And the more we can ask ourselves that, I believe the more intentional we can live our life with authenticity. And now it's your turn. I want you to just take a moment and ask yourself, what kind of blueprint might I be living from? And answer the questions. How do I respond to stress, to connection, to uncertainty? How do I respond to conflict? And maybe this week, try tracking your nervous system state and just notice without judgment. Am I in flight? Am I in fight? Am I in shutdown? And am I in ventral vagal where I feel good, safe, and connected? And just start to gather data about your story. I do have a little worksheet that I'm going to include in the show notes to help you reflect and just identify your blueprint and what you learned and where you can see patterns that have been passed through generations and things that you may have passed down to your kids. You can just download that in the show notes. So thank you for listening. If you found any of this helpful, if you resonated with any of it, if you could see part of your blueprint and you can understand yourself just a little bit more, I encourage you to share it with somebody who's navigating their own healing journey, and make sure to come back next week. So take care. Thanks for tuning in to Burnout Solutions. If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I would appreciate it if you could rate and review so other people can find this podcast easier. And when you're ready to stop working harder and start working differently, head on over to my website at www.monatippets.com. That's TIPPETS. And grab my free resources on rewiring your brain and nervous system for less stress and more ease. Hope to connect with you soon. Take care.